I think, when I was in the process of transitioning the church, and I was a part of a team, but I was appointed the campus
And for
pastor.
context, this is 20-something years ago.
23 years ago.
You were helping transition an older existing church into a newer, merging with a newer church, and you were tasked with helping make that transition.
Exactly.
Just to give context for the listeners.
Yeah. So this is 23 years ago, and really I was kind of thrown in the deep end.
Which is another style of leadership.
Which is another style of leadership, absolutely. Yeah, sink or swim.
Sink or swim.
Sink or swim leadership.
And so I had to work through this whole thing. And one of the things we did before I talk about Abraham is every Tuesday morning we would have our team meeting, our staff meeting. We would go through all these things I've just mentioned.
Nice.
Language, food, customs, music, architecture.
Wow.
How are we doing with our language? We don't talk like that anymore.
Yeah.
That's not going to help us get to where we want to go. How do we go with our hospitality this Sunday? How do we go? How did people react when we took the microphones off the platform, that the people who used to prophesy on the platform every Sunday were complaining because they didn't have anywhere to prophesy anymore.
Wow.
Because that was a custom that had to go.
Wow. Let's talk about that one.
That had to go.
Those services must have been a lot of fun.
They were, Depends what you call fun.
Fun for the people prophesying.
Fun for the people prophesying. So first thing I did was remove
You could say, why didn't you prophesy that these mics were going to leave at some point?
I have a word.
So
Next weekend, these won't be here.
well, exactly. The weekend when the clock struck midnight, the microphones went. Gone. So, and we would talk about the worship. We'd talk about how we're building that. So we would go through all of those things. But one of the things I felt that as I was looking at culture, I looked at the life of Abraham, and I think we often look at Abraham as the father of faith, but he was actually the father of kingdom culture as well. The Bible's a story of taking people from one culture to the next.
True.
Abraham out of a culture of idolatry to a culture of faith.
Yep.
Moses from a culture of slavery to a culture of freedom.
This is great.
Jesus from a culture of tradition to a culture of resurrection life.
Wow.
So when you look at the Bible through that lens, you see how important culture is in fulfilling God's purpose. So Abraham literally...
And how important
great.
leadership is to lead out of certain cultures into other cultures, right?
Exactly.
We might need to do a pod on those three things in the future.
That's powerful.
That was really great.
Yeah. So when you look at the life of Abraham, God told him to leave Mesopotamia, go to Canaan, and as you go through, there are three things he said: leave your nation, leave your family, and leave your father's house. And all of us have things in our lives, from our nationality, positives and negatives, from our...
This is a good time for you to share the heaven and hell analogies.
It's true.
I love this. Are you going to do it now or later?
I can do it now.
The joke.
If you like.
A little joke.
Well, there is a kind of a humorous joke about heaven and hell, and they say that heaven is where the cooks are French, the comedians are English, the mechanics are German, the lovers are Italian, and everything's organized by the Swiss.
Yeah.
Hell is where the cooks are English, the comedians are German, the mechanics are French, the lovers are Swiss, and everything's organized by the Italians.
Here we are in Italy.
No offense to the Italians, please.
You just offended the whole audience. Just kidding.
That was great.
I love that.
So we all have characteristics from where we grew up. And I didn't grow up in a Christian home. And one of the things that we need to do is we need to forget the deeply encoded lessons, that things that have been impregnated into our spirit and into our DNA. Some things we have to forget in order to embrace anew. So Abraham had to leave his nation, his family, his father's house, and then he had to bury his father. He had to leave what he was familiar with,
right.
and he had to separate from Lot. And sometimes there are some things, and I think it's important to realize that the previous generation, the culture of the previous generation, got us to where we are.
Served its purposes.
And served its purposes. But there's a day when that day is over.
True.
And if we hang on to those things, sometimes they just need to, they need to be buried. So he buried, he left, and then he separated from Lot. And I think the interesting thing about the separation from Lot is that Lot was never supposed to be with Abraham. Lot was a part of the old culture. Abraham took the old culture with him into the new culture. And what happened is the two Abraham's servants and Lot's servants began to quarrel.
Yep.
And then the scripture, it says, because the land was not able to support them both. The land that we want to take isn't able to support the old culture and the new culture together. And yesterday's culture will always quarrel with today's culture. And they can't coexist.
That's so good.
So those are some of the steps that Abraham needed to take to get into the land. And then, I find it fascinating because every time I read through it with this lens, I find new things about Abraham. And it's, in a way, it's not surprising. He's the father of faith. This was the beginning of the people of God. Yeah. So God was laying out a blueprint, if you like, for what kingdom culture was going to be like.